And now, thanks to that Asian dick, she finally embraces her Asian culture. Good for her, but it wasn't an entertaining story to me. Today, I'm going to be talking about the rest of the books that I read in the month of September. Before we get into that, I want to say thank you to today's sponsor, Function of Beauty. Function of Beauty is a totally new experience where you choose everything from your own hair type to hair goals, color, scent, and even the name on your bottle. I have been using their bottles for the past few months now, and I just got a new batch because, as you can tell, I recently bleached my hair, which means that my hair is fried and it needs more protection. So I got shampoo and conditioner that is fit for my hair profile, which I selected as wavy and coarse. The goals that I selected were pretty much to counteract all the damage that I did with bleaching my hair, which is anti-frizz, deep condition, fixing split ends, nourishing roots, and reducing brassiness. I got these as silicone-free bottles, and the fragrance that I chose were True Lavender and Light. I also got body wash and body lotion, which you can customize based on your skin moisture level. I also got a custom leave-in treatment, which is a lightweight conditioning cream that smooths and hydrates and protects the hair. It is 100% vegan and gluten-free. If you're interested in getting your own custom bottles, you can click the link in my description below to get 20% off of your first order. The first book that I'm going to be covering in this video is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. This is a self-help book that you pretty much see in a lot of bookstores around the US. I think the reason why it got so popular when it first came out is because the author gives a more contrarian point of view. A lot of people say that positive thinking is the key to having a happy and rich life, whereas the author is saying that positivity can only really do so much. Rather than being coddled and tricking ourselves into thinking that everything is okay, we should just accept that shit is fucked up and reprioritize the things that we actually give a damn about. Essentially, he's saying that there are so many things that people give a fuck about, and it's often misplaced, and instead we need to grab our fucks and place them into better areas that best serve us. I gave this book 3 stars. However, I can totally understand why people would rate it lower. This book has a very, very edgy dude bro tone of voice. It gets really annoying and tiring, especially in the beginning of the book, because he is constantly dropping F-bombs, and you can tell that he's just doing that in order to be edgy and be like not like other self-help books. It very much feels like the majority of the writing is just for the sake of being contrarian and giving you this real talk and saying it like it is and having ruthless humor. But with the constant cursing and the F-bombs, it just feels like it's so try-hard. Honestly, this is probably how people who don't like me view my videos on the surface level, in which case I totally agree that it is very annoying. The reason why I rated it 3 stars though is because I do agree with some of the points that he wrote, mostly in the first half of the book. Whatever you do in life is going to be a struggle, so you need to find a struggle that's right for you. I absolutely agree with this kind of philosophy. I've said this in a vlog before when I first interviewed at my job. I went on this whole philosophical rant because I realized that as someone with depression, I'm gonna be miserable regardless, so I might as well find something that I'm okay with being miserable with. For some reason, it's less motivating coming from my mouth, but hopefully you know what I mean. It's more so accepting that struggling is gonna be inevitable. It's more about finding the right thing that you wanna struggle for. Another thing I really agree with is him saying that people are addicted to feeling outraged and feeling like a victim in order to avoid responsibility and accountability. And yes, it can be for very valid reasons, but sometimes people go so overboard where they funnel themselves in this role of a victim and rob themselves of their own agency. But if you were to take full responsibility of your own life, regardless of your circumstances and regardless of what you have been through, then that's how you can lead to more positive change. I definitely agree with how people are addicted to outrage because, in particular, every time you go on book Twitter every day, there's always a whole bunch of subtweets about people getting angry at one person because they said something really idiotic or racist or bigoted or whatever. The fact of the matter is, there's always going to be stupid fucking people everywhere. If you spend your whole day getting angry, subtweeting your entire feed about this one person that pissed you off, you're not gonna really live your life in a fulfilling way. And it's like, do you really want to spend your time caring about that? I agree on taking accountability for your own life rather than how much of a victim you are, because that is the only way that you're gonna be able to move forward and have positive change rather than be stuck. The other parts of the book, I didn't really care for. I think that this book would be most appealing to straight white men. You can really get that sense of perspective from the author. A lot of his advice resonates with specifically his demographic rather than other groups of people. For example, the whole idea of how victimhood comes with entitlement and how it prevents positive change. I agree with that to a certain extent. If you look at specific places like Twitter, that is absolutely true. But you can't really take it as a blanket statement for the rest of the world, especially when you consider the fact that this author is a white man who admitted in the book that he grew up from a very wealthy family. So for him to go on and on about the entitlement of victimhood, knowing what his background is like, doesn't quite sit well with me. A lot of times he kind of has like this boomer attitude where he views his generation as very spoiled and in need of coddling, which again, I agree to a certain extent. But it can't be said as blanket statements because there are so many different factors and circumstances that people have gone through. To see that coming from like an old white straight dude, I'm not sure if that advice is quite universal. That's why I took away some parts of his advice that I did agree with, but I made sure not to view it as like the end all be all truth of the world. After that, the next book that I read is a chick lit book called If I Never Met You. This follows the main character, Lori, who is a lawyer and has been in a relationship with a guy for over 10 years. Not only does she live with him, but he also works at the same law firm as she does. So her life has pretty much been revolved around him the entire time. And naturally, as what happens in the beginning of every chick lit book, there is a surprise breakup. He decides to end things even though they've been dating for so long. He realizes that he doesn't know if they're just together out of comfort and out of all the time that they've invested. There's this question of whether you're just in a relationship because you've already been together for so long and now it feels like it's out of obligation. So I actually was kind of on his side in the beginning because I was like, yeah, you know what? That's a super valid point. What I didn't realize, because I keep on not reading the synopsis whenever I pick up a book nowadays, is that shortly after the breakup, the main girl finds out that he already has a girlfriend and now she's pregnant, which means that his whole spiel in the beginning of the book was kind of just like a flimsy excuse because he was emotionally cheating on her, and then the moment that they broke up, he ran towards the other girl and then they got knocked up right away, which is an extra insult to the main girl because she had this whole future planned ahead of them where they would get married and she really wanted kids, and then when he broke up with her, he said that he didn't want any kids. But then lo and behold, first time he did it with another girl, boom, she got pregnant immediately. That fertility rate was super high. Her life is in shambles. It's also embarrassing because they still work at the same workplace and there's a lot of office gossip going around, especially now that he has a pregnant girlfriend. She decides to spice up the rumor mill even more by fake dating the office playboy. This is the male lead of the book. Even though he is a playboy, he decides that he wants to fake date her because he is trying to become a partner to the law firm, but the CEOs are not taking him seriously because he has that reputation of being a playboy. So if he were to show them that he has a respectable and steady girlfriend and he is playing it mature, then he is more of a viable candidate. I can kind of see his motivation for wanting to fake date, but not for her. Because like, what is the point? She just wants her ex to feel bitter or jealous, I guess. Maybe that would be more understandable if they were still in high school, but this woman is literally 36 years old. So it is very embarrassing to see this older millennial try to make her ex jealous. And it's like, dude, all of you guys are lawyers at a law firm. Don't you have like actual work to do? I rated this book 3 stars. It's probably more like 2 stars as I dive more into the flaws of it, but I'm gonna go ahead and be generous with 3 stars anyway because I was engaged throughout reading this book. Like, I was interested in seeing the drama and seeing how the relationship would develop, but objectively speaking, there wasn't that many great things about it. Particularly the protagonist. She was such a slog to get through. You're stuck in her head the entire time, and I felt exhausted just being in her head. She is very bland and old. And I'm not even saying that because of her age. I'm saying that from her vibe, from her energy, from her whole demeanor. This book makes me feel like it was targeted towards older women who are very bitter at their ex-spouses. And I totally 100% get why she is so bitter and cynical because that is a very shitty situation to go through. But I read for escapism, not to be reminded of my own flaws and see my own future flash before my eyes. And so it was just depressing having to read that shit and be stuck in her head because I was like, God, I am gonna be that boring, cynical, bitter bitch when I'm her age too. And that's not fun to read about for me personally. Plus, she is so immature and she has such a judgmental attitude, especially towards the male lead of the book. So when you're constantly exhausted by her cynicism and when you're stuck in the mindset of a bitter old lady, it doesn't quite make a fun reading experience. When you get past the first third of the book, you see more of the love interest, who is this younger dude. So first of all, props to her for being a cougar. Second of all, thank God he's now in the story because he's literally breathing life and youth into this book. Now I can finally take a fucking break from this drag of a protagonist and I can enjoy his character. He is so much better to read about because he is so much more easygoing and suave. Even though he is a playboy, he isn't like a douchebag about it. He just knows what he wants, and what he wants is not a relationship, but just like a casual kind of thing. My main motivation to read this was because I was so curious how this suave, easygoing man would fall for this bitter old lady like myself. But I feel kind of weird about how it did play out. I'm not going to go into any details, but basically I feel like the author used trauma and grief as a main point to get the characters to feel closer to one another. So it feels weird for me to see grief being used as a plot point, because then it's like, well, do you two actually like each other, or did you two just happen to be in the same vicinity as one another when one of you was going through a really difficult time? I don't even care to talk about the third act. Just know that it was stupid. It came out of nowhere. It was just giving whiplash all around. And then the weird thing is there were all these loose ends and none of them got tied up at the end. It was like the author just wanted to end the story, so she just ended it like that. And it's like, wait a minute, what is this character gonna do? What is this character gonna do? How are they gonna deal with this consequence or this consequence? And the author's just like, I don't know, you fucking figure it out for yourself. Basically, this is a very generous 3 stars for me. After that, the next book that I read is Pets, which is an urban fantasy middle grade book. This takes place in a utopian-like city where there are no monsters that exist anymore. And what's interesting about this story is that these monsters that had existed before have taken the form of many things, like policemen, murderers, abusers, all the different forms of how humanity is awful, but being described as monsters. They even take the form of institutions like the prison complex. But now they live in a world where there's no prisons, no police, everything is just fine and dandy. The main character is a transgender girl who lives with 2 doting parents, and she has a best friend until one day she meets this strange looking creature that she names Pet, because I guess we couldn't think of any other name for it. This creature is made of horns and claws and colors, and he emerged from one of her mother's paintings. He says that he has come here to hunt a monster, and she's like, what are you talking about? Monsters don't exist here anymore. But he insists that there are, because there is a monster that is lurking in her best friend's house, and nobody knows about it. So the story is about her working with Pet to protect her best friend and trying to figure out how to save the world from monsters if no one will admit that monsters exist. I rate this 3.5 stars. The writing is very charming and a bit of a whimsical feeling, but like in a dark kind of way. It's surprisingly mature for middle grade, but I think that this book would be good for children because it takes very complex ideas and is able to simplify it a lot more. There is a little bit of a trigger warning that I would add for a hint of sexual abuse. It's not described or talked about, but it's kind of indirectly hinted at. But I think it's still a relevant and important topic of how people can just do monstrous things and how there are some adults that turn a blind eye towards that. I would have rated this book higher if it were longer and if it were more of an adventure story, but because it is so short and straightforward, it doesn't develop the characters and the world as much as it could be. The world is really interesting, the characters are endearing, so I would have liked a longer story where they go on these adventures, but instead it was very short and straightforward. The main character had to do something, and then she did it. The end. Like, that's pretty much it. I would have loved a more expansive plot with an adventure and more of a sense of surprise, but I don't think that's what the author was trying to go for. She was just going for a very simple and short story that children could try to grapple their minds around, and I think it worked for that. After that, the next book that I read is One to Watch, which is a contemporary romance featuring a plus-size fashion blogger who gets recruited to go on a reality show that is basically like The Bachelorette. The reality show is pretty much a carbon copy of The Bachelorette, Bachelorette, where there is one woman who goes on a date with like 20 plus guys, and then she has to choose which one to marry by the end of the show. And all the guys all pretty much look the same, and all the women that they choose to be the Bachelorette are pretty much the same in terms of conventional beauty standards. However, the reality show decides to change it up by recruiting the main character because she is a very prominent plus size person that is famous on the internet. She agrees to go on the show in order to advance her career as well as subvert harmful stereotypes and standards that we have against fat women. This was the most addicting book that I have read this year, maybe of all time. This is so fun to buddy read with other people. Both you and your friend can try to guess who she's gonna end up with or which guy is trustworthy or not. The story is even more fun than what you see on reality TV because you get to see the behind the scenes perspective of how much they fabricate versus how much is authentic. We treated it like it was a murder mystery because we didn't know who to trust. I was suspicious of every single guy on the reality show because I didn't know who was actually legit in having their real romantic feelings for the main girl or who was just faking it for the cameras. How much of it is real and how much of it is a script. There's this one particular chapter where something happens at the end and my jaw just dropped because I was so shocked at what happened. I mean, I kind of knew it was going to happen, but the audacity of the events that happened was just a lot to digest. And I texted my friend about it, who I buddy read it with. And once she got to that part, I'm going to show the text messages that we sent to each other. She said, oh my God, what the fuck? What the ever-loving fuck? I want to cry. I want to throw up. I fucking hate censored. And I'm like, dude, my jaw dropped as he kept on talking. And she says, but now I don't trust any of the men again, including censored, despite the fact that he was wonderful this chapter. And I'm arguing to her, no, that's what this character wants you to think. And my friend is just like, I feel sick, dude. That was hard to read. I can't imagine how hearing it felt like because I listened to it on audiobook, which by the way, it was a fun audiobook experience as well. So if that chat message was any indicator, it gets pretty juicy. This is a fun book to gossip about with your friends because there's a lot of things to yell about. Besides the reality show shenanigans, this book does a really great job at plus size representation. Obviously, I can't speak for it because I am a skinny legend, but I bet he read this with two plus size women who were actually kind of triggered by a lot of the things that happened, not because it was bad representation, but because it was so accurate to their thought process and to the way that other people have treated them. You go through the emotional journey of the main character grappling with her own self-love and acceptance. It feels very authentic, both from my perspective as, you know, a skinny, thin bitch, and from the other plus size friends that I read it with. And because of that, the book has a lot of heart written into it. It feels very earnest, the emotional journey that the main character goes through. I think what adds another layer to this is the attitude towards plus size women on the internet, on reality TV, in the public eye in general. Between the chapters, there's a bunch of blog posts and magazine articles and tweets and Slack chats and all kinds of different online mediums that track what people are saying about the main character or about the show. And it is super painfully accurate. It really reflected our culture and how we treat plus size people and how we often politicize the identities of plus size people. Everything that she did, or even just her existence, was a point of contention among a lot of people. People were saying that this was some grand political message about self-love and everyone is beautiful, and then other people were getting pissed off that a fat woman existed. They were two different extremes, but they both showed how fat women simply can't just exist without it being like a message or a political statement. It has to mean something. It has to mean breaking the beauty standard or looking past beauty beneath the skin, when really we should just let a bitch breathe and let her live her life. And I had so much fun reading this. I felt emotionally satisfied by the end of the story. My friends rated it 4 stars because they didn't quite agree with what happens in the third act conflict. And I can kind of understand that because I didn't agree with the main character's actions towards the end either. However, I still ended up rating it 5 stars because even though I didn't agree with her actions, it was still pretty damn juicy. So I couldn't really hate on that. And also, this was the most fun I've had reading a book in a long time. I do want to note though, because the third act conflict is something that I always always complain about in romance books. I didn't quite have a similar kind of issue in this book that I did with other books. Other books rely on miscommunication or some kind of thing that gives you whiplash and comes out of nowhere. This one, I feel like, is legitimately juicy for the sake of the reality show format. And what I do want to point out, without giving spoilers for what happens, is that a lot of times in the third act conflicts, what I've seen in other books shows the protagonist feeling like their life is in shambles after they lose the guy. Like, they just become a whole fucking mess. They regret all the mistakes that they made. They wish that they could take it back. They're pretty much a whole broken piece until they eventually get back together with the guy, and then everything is okay again. For this book, I'm not gonna say what happens, but what I did like about this particular story is that after the conflict happens, it is definitely very terrible and a shitty experience for the main character, but she comes to peace with it. She thinks, you know what? I don't regret the decisions that I've made. I've made my decision. I will live with it. Whatever happens, whether I'm single or whether I end up with someone, I'm gonna be okay no matter what. So it was very much more a testament to her own personal self-growth that wasn't necessarily dependent on whether she would get together with a love interest or not. Because the real journey was just her accepting and loving herself, not whether another dude loved her. So I really liked that, even though I didn't necessarily agree with some of the things that she did in the last third. After that, the next book that I read is Sex and Vanity. This is written by the same author as Crazy Rich Asians. This follows a main character who is half white and half Asian, and she constantly feels like she is torn between two worlds. She comes from a very wealthy and prestigious background because her father is a rich white man, but because she has features that are obviously Asian, that has prevented her from being fully immersed within this prestigious white world, where she's kind of seen as other or exotic because she has those unusual features. I feel like there's a double standard with mixed children where people really prefer a half white child where they still look mostly white, but they pick and choose a few of the ethnic features that the other race has so that they look a bit more unique looking but still white passing. That is kind of the case for the main character's brother, who has more of the white and conventionally attractive features, whereas the main character is very clearly Asian. The story begins when she is attending a wedding and she meets this Asian man who, for some reason, she feels tumultuous emotions against, which to me didn't really make sense because he was really just chilling the whole time. But I think the author really wanted to make it seem like she has some undeniable attraction towards this man, this hot, sizzling chemistry that she couldn't ignore that was so palpable. But it didn't really translate well to me because if you look at it on the surface level, this dude is just standing there breathing, just minding his own business, not even talking to anybody. And then the main girl is just like, oh, what the fuck is his problem? Why is he so quiet? Oh my God, he's so annoying. I can't even stand him. But why do I keep on thinking about him? Wait, does he like me? What is he even thinking about? How can I understand this enigma of a man? How can he be so infuriating yet so intoxicating? What is this pull that he has? This strange power where I can't look away even though I hate him, or do I hate him? And it's just like this whole thought process that's so exhausting to go through because again, he's just sitting there chilling. He's not even doing anything. She's running circles around her head just to try to make sense of him for like fucking breathing. I think the author was trying to make a parallel to how her denial for her feelings towards this Asian man is like a metaphor for her denial towards Asian culture in general. And that's why she thinks that she can't be with him because she doesn't want to accept that Asian part of herself. But it didn't really land well. The protagonist was super immature, especially in the last third of the book. She does so many things all at once that are so stupid, but she just does it without thinking about it. So it's very much like being in the mindset of a child that's behaving in a very rash way. But she's not a child. She's like in her late 20s. So I'm like, bitch, what the hell are you doing? All the characters were super flat and also very, very annoying. Maybe it was kind of done on purpose. Like the side characters were all supposed to be kooky and quirky and annoying. Therefore, it would make sense why the main character starts to fall for that mysterious Asian guy because he's quiet the whole time and he's not fucking irritating like all the rest of the characters are. Like it's supposed to be a satire of how vapid the lifestyles of the rich are, But even if that was on purpose, the more serious and emotional parts of the book, where he's trying to convey this message of accepting yourself and accepting all of your cultures, is still as vapid as the way that he's treated the other characters in the book. Especially towards the end, the characters start spouting these really long monologues that straightforwardly tell you the message that you're supposed to walk away from in this book, instead of, just showing it to you through action or through symbols or some kind of subtlety. I just don't get how we're supposed to believe that this is some whirlwind romance where they can't deny their attraction and chemistry towards each other, that they have to go on this whole spiel of declaration of love. But it's like, you two have only met like 3 times. You guys are acquaintances at best. Also, I've never read Crazy Rich Asians, but I think this book is pretty much a sign that I will not be reading that series because I can't get into the writing style. This author's whole writing style is basically like, she spiraled down the staircase of the Met Gala sponsored by Louis Vuitton, her Tiffany necklace twinkling in azure blue. She flashed the 32 pearls of her teeth as bright as her 10.5 diamond ring before she put on her Gucci sunglasses and applied a fresh shade of her Dior red velvet lipstick. It's basically a whole bunch of unnecessary details of all these different brands and like a travel guide to Italy. But just because it's super detailed doesn't mean it's necessarily good. I'm not here to read a bunch of brand names. I'm here to read a story. And this wasn't a story. This was just some emotionally stunted girl who met a dude like 3 times. And now, thanks to that Asian dick, she finally embraces her Asian culture. Good for her, but it wasn't an entertaining story to me. So I rated it 2 stars. This video is already getting long, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up with 2 YA fantasy books that I read towards the end of the month. The first one is A Song of Race and Ruin. This is a YA fantasy based on West African culture. It follows 2 perspectives. One is a refugee who has a younger sister who gets abducted by a vengeful spirit, and he makes a deal with that spirit that in order to save his sister, he agrees to kill the princess of the kingdom that they belong to. The other perspective is the princess herself, who is dealing with the grief of losing her mother when an assassin kills her. She's filled with grief and she decides to use ancient magic to resurrect her mother from the dead, but in order to make sure that it's successful, one of the things that is required for her to perform the ritual is the heart of a king. In the book, there is a competition with a bunch of physical and mental challenges where the winner of the contest will win the princess's hand in marriage. So this is like a win-win for both the main guy and the girl, because the guy can get close to the princess and try to kill her, and the princess can try to get close to the guy and try to kill him. So it's like a win-win all around. I'm gonna try to keep my thoughts on this short because I realized that I can't get into YA fantasy anymore, and I feel like you should just take my reviews with a grain of salt. I mean, you should take all my reviews with a grain of salt, but especially for YA fantasy, because I'm not part of the demographic, I'm not part of the audience that this is aimed towards. Even though I wasn't hooked with the story or got too attached to characters, I still think that it has a lot of merits, particularly with how this is a fantasy that is directly inspired by West African culture. You can really see how much love the author has for that, as shown through all of the world building details, the magic system, even the delicious food that they eat. There's a lot of rich mythology and folklore that gets incorporated into it, and I think that is a very unique take that we need rather than the same typical European fantasy setting. The main male lead also has this kind of softness and vulnerability to him, which I think is important to show in a male character. He deals with a lot of anxiety and panic attacks and mental illness, and I was really impressed by how in the climax of the story, his mental illness actually plays a role to what he does towards the end. I'm not going to say what happens, but I was quite impressed by it. But even though I wasn't personally hooked in the story, I think that if you are a fan of YA fantasy and you're looking for stories with different types of world building, this is the book that you can check out. Similarly, I have the same kind of opinion for the next book that I read, which is Mirage. This is a sci-fi and fantasy YA series. It takes place in a star system that is dominated by a very brutal empire. The main character is an 18-year-old girl who is just a simple hoe, she just wants to write poetry and just chill and have a good time. But then she gets kidnapped by the regime and taken in secret to the royal palace. She meets the princess of that palace, and to her surprise, they look nearly identical. So the reason why they brought her in is so that she can actually act as the body double for the princess, because the princess is a straight up bitch, like nobody likes her. She's probably gonna get assassinated, so they need the main character to just fill in her spot in case anything happens. So the book follows her grappling with her new role as the fake princess, as well as falling for the princess's fiance. This is a YA fantasy that's directly inspired by Moroccan culture. It also incorporates a lot of spoken poetry and familial values that you often see in that culture. Again, I think I'm really not into YA fantasy anymore, but I ended up listening to the interview that the author did at the end of the audiobook, and I was actually really interested in hearing her thought process with trying to put the story together. She really put a lot of care and thought into researching for the story. She based a lot of the empire and the way that it works on her thesis. So she really knew what she was talking about. A lot of it, I'm sure, is very close to home for her. So again, that's why I think you should take my personal enjoyment and my rating with a grain of salt. I think that this is still a book that has a lot of merits for a young adult audience, especially if they're looking for more diverse fantasy with a sprinkle of sci-fi elements. So if you typically enjoy YA books and this type of genre, I think you should check out these books. I think that they would definitely be enjoyed by someone who is not so jaded and old and bitter like myself. For the month of October, I will be reading Lock Every Door, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, Magic Lessons, Ties That Tether, Leave the World Behind, The Girl in the Mirror, Whisper Man, Bunny, Mexican Gothic, and whatever else I can get my hands on. Goodbye.
Guys are nothing, I can tell you that. Just line them all up, you know, back to back. And I can prove to you that none of them are worthy. 'Cause girl, you're gold and all of them are dirty, baby.